You're listening to This Week in America with Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. Great to have you with us on the program. As mentioned, we're talking about a fascinating book called Eludoran. With us is Jonathan Goh. That's G-O-H. He's the writer of the book, author of the book. He's coming to us via Skype from Singapore. And his illustrator, as mentioned, Anye Ewing, is coming with us on the program via Skype as well from here in the United States. Jonathan and Anye, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
So much to talk about. And Jonathan, you've really done an excellent, fascinating job with the book, Eludoran, and that's spelled E-L-U-D-O-R-A-N. The website is eludoran.com. You can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on and go directly to Jonathan's website. Jonathan, let's talk a little bit about the structure of the book. The book is really highly innovative. It's award-winning. Talk about the structure of the book, and then we'll give a brief overview.
Well, overall, the book is divided into 3 acts, and each act is 16 chapters long, or the first 2 acts are at least, and it's supposed to symbolize the 16 waking hours of the day, because I intentionally wanted it to be a performance piece, one that can be performed like throughout the whole day, something like that. So if you were to perform it as a play, it can be done, but it has to be broken up into 3 parts. So it will take 3 days to perform the whole thing at a stretch. So that's the reason why it's structured like that.
The book we're talking about is Eludoran. That's E-L-U-D-O-R-A-N. The structure is really innovative. I mentioned award-winning. We'll come back to that in a second, but talk a little bit about the context of the book. Give me an overview of what the story is and how you went about writing this.
The story is a fantasy story with an Asian cultural twist. It features a heroine protagonist who is going off on a quest because she feels that she is neglected and misunderstood by her father, when this is really not the case. This issue is a very prevalent one in Asian cultures, where there's a big commonality of miscommunication between older generations and younger generations. So I thought I would just add this feature to what is already an existing fantasy stereotype and see what came of it. And Eludoran is the result.
The novel is actually one entire long poem. Talk about the format of that and what you did, because it's amazing. As you're reading through this, you're fascinated, number one, by the story, but number two, by what it actually took for you to put the story together and do it in this form. Talk about the structure from that aspect.
I see. Structuring it as a poem was partly hubris on my part, because I wanted to do something similar to J.R.R. Tolkien, who, when he did his Lay of Leithian, his unfinished poem. I wanted to one-up him and complete a poem that was longer and greater than his could have ever been. And this is also the result of that. I structured Eludoran in the same verse structure as Tolkien did, 8-syllable rhyming lines and tetrameter. And I believe his ended at around 4,200 lines, while mine is topping at 15,800 lines, which makes it a world record-breaking poem in that category.
With us on This Week in America, Jonathan Goh, that's G-O-H, the author of the book, Eludoran, that's E-L-U-D-O-R-A-N. Eludoran.com is the website. The illustrator, Anye Ewing, both are coming, by the way, on the program today via Skype. Anya's here in the United States. Jonathan is in Singapore. Anye, what was and you work a lot with authors and creative people. When you were given this project and you got in contact with Jonathan and you saw exactly what he did, what were some of your thoughts initially?
Well, he was actually one of the first authors I had commission me. I've done a lot of commissions for individual clients who just had certain fantasy illustrations they wished to have brought to life. And it wasn't a long-term project with Jonathan at first. He contacted me interested in simply a cover illustration for his first book in the same universe, The Laments of Lenore. And I was pretty fascinated. I'd never seen a fantasy novel written in poem form, and it reminded me very much of a class I took in college about epic medieval poetry. And so when I was initially describing this commission I'd received to other people, I was like, well, I'm working for this author who essentially writes epic poetry, storytelling in this unique format. And I'm really pleased to be working for someone like that, because it's unlike anything I'd ever seen before.
What's it like when you take on a project like that, and your responsibility is to do the illustrations, and it becomes a job at that point, at least in terms of, okay, that's what you do for a living, and that's what you're doing for Jonathan. But the fact that you're a fan as well, and I can tell that in what you're talking about, that you actually really enjoyed the project. What's it like when you have that enjoyment factor that actually becomes part of your everyday job?
Well, I am a full-time freelance artist, so I think it's important that I enjoy my process no matter what project I'm taking on, since I don't very often get a chance to illustrate my own ideas, because that doesn't pay. So I guess it's about finding that enjoyment, finding that inspiration, getting excited for the other person. Like, Jonathan's very invested in his writing, and it's really heartwarming to see. And I think he legitimately gets excited every time we have a streaming session together, so that's also very heartwarming. Like, he's mentioned that he looks forward to it. So I guess just the synergy of working back and forth adds a lot to the project. And Jonathan in particular is very specific with the anatomy of his characters and the particulars of his vision. So I kind of feel like his hands.
It gets difficult for my illustrators at times. I think I've gone through like about 8 to 10 different illustrators before finding Miss Ewing here, and well, it was a blessing, because this is the first time I had someone stay with me throughout 3 years, which is like quite impressive, come to think about it.
Well, that's really impressive, because these are just not words to you. This actually is a visual project that you were putting together. You can envision exactly what you're saying, and then relaying that to Anye. You mentioned something. Jonathan Go, our guest on the program, the book is Eludoran, Eludoran. Jonathan, talk a little bit about the time it took to actually work on this project. You mentioned like 3 years, and a lot of that I know was spent in editing. How long a process was this for you, and how long did it take to the point where you feel that you're satisfied with where you are?
Well, I suppose, like many authors, I'm not really satisfied with the product, because writing is an ongoing process that you have to keep perfecting and editing. But at some point, you have to tell yourself that, okay, I've made enough edits, I have to let it go now, because if I don't, then it's not going to go out there. So I suppose at this point, it's probably good enough to be released, even though I myself think that there are areas that I would have improved if I had the chance to at this moment in time. The writing itself wasn't that difficult, actually. It was the editing process that really takes it out of a person. I believe, although I spent like 2 to 3 years writing it, it took like nearly a year's time or so to edit the whole thing, and that's quite time consuming, both on my part and also on the publisher's part, because I keep having to resend the files and get them to make corrections and so on and so forth. So
You know, I knew when I asked that question that you were going to say you're never quite satisfied with the way it's ended. You're always thinking about how you can go back and make some changes. I knew that was going to be the answer there. Eludoran is the name of the book, Eludoran. Eludoran.com is the website for information. The book's available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Ex Libris, all across the country. And you can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on directly. Jonathan Go is the author with us on the program. Anye Ewing is the illustrator with us on the program as well. Jonathan, let's talk about this fantasy world that you've created. Let's talk a little bit about that, and then some of the characters that we'll find in the book Eludoran.
Okay, well, the protagonist, like I mentioned before, is a girl, a youngster who is unsatisfied with her position and thinks that her father is not appreciative of her. So what she does is try to gain his attention by any means necessary, and this leads to a tragedy when she goes off down a darker path, but such things often happen in this genre anyway, so yeah. And the whole story is set in the backdrop of war. There's 2 nations who have been fighting, and one of them has already conquered the other. So we are telling this story from the underdog's point of view, the conquered nation, because often history has been written from the point of the victors. I thought it would be interesting to explore the situation from the people who actually lost the fight. Like, what would they say about their conquerors? What sort of thing would counteract the propaganda, and so on and so forth.
The book is Eludoran, that's Eludoran. Eludoran.com is the website. Jonathan Goh, the author, and Anye Ewing, the illustrator, with us on This Week in America. And, of course, information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Let's talk a little bit, Jonathan, about the themes in the book. And as you're reading Eludoran, there are different layers as you're going through and enjoying the book. Talk about some of the themes that people will find as they're reading Eludoran.
Well, there's always the surface themes of romance, fantasy, tragedy. But at the same time, while writing this book, I was going for more of trying to subvert existing stereotypes and themes. You will notice that there are elements of dystopian fiction in the novel, recalling stuff like Hunger Games and Twilight, that kind of thing. Only that in my case, I tried to lampshade the fact that it's a dystopia and stuff, poke fun at it, if you will. For example, in most of the dystopian fiction that's been written, the heroine is always a confident, skilled character who does what it takes to overcome the odds. In my version of the telling, the heroine is just as confident, except that she may be a little overconfident of her own abilities. So that is the subversion there. I'm trying to provide a view that is a bit more realistic. I mean, confidence is all very well and good, but it only gets you so far. You need to also have be able to write the checks that your mouth is putting up. So yeah, I thought that would be an interesting thing to see. And usually romances, they involve like the hero trying to rescue the heroine. Here is more of a case of the heroine having the spotlight on her, and the hero is like trying to stop her. The hero is more like the love interest in the story, which marginalizes his role in a way. So yes, those are just two of the subversions that I have woven into the text.
Anya, and it's your job to make these characters come to life visually. And as mentioned, this has been a collaborative effort that's going on for several years. Talk about how much fun this has been for you to take these characters that Jonathan has created. And he's got sort of a raw form of what he thinks these people would look like. And then you have to bring them to life. And then we'll talk about the next stage, which is possibly doing a comic book on this or doing a film of some kind. What's the process been like for you that you've actually been able to take Jonathan's characters and breathe some life into them?
Well, it's kind of a process of getting to know them over the course of time, because initially, as I mentioned, he had me do a book cover, and two book covers, actually, of the characters, and I didn't know anything about them, just basic visual descriptions and his particulars about their arrangement. And I only learned their names after illustrating them the first time and spending like a chunk of 12 hours painting these creatures, because another unique thing about the characters is they are depicted as human animal characters instead of simply human protagonists, which helps exaggerate and characterize them. This was part of Jonathan's vision, is that they are animal elf scions, so they're magical creatures. The protagonist, Lorelei, and the hero, Malachi, are both canid like elves. So it was very interesting, trying to determine their hairstyles and their fur color, and watching that evolve as Jonathan changed his mind while writing them about, how they should carry themselves. How I remember Lorelei in particular, or Lorelei, excuse me, used to have very smooth, kind of sultry looking hair, and grew to have very disheveled, kind of almost punkish hair as she became more and more rebellious, as this villainous, this kind of, I guess, evil queen she evolved into. So that was pretty curious. And with regards to the storyboarding and potential animation comic, on that, Jonathan's actually given me a little bit more free rein than he has with the individual illustrations. He was very specific with those, and as I mentioned before, I kind of felt like I literally was his hands, and I was just translating what he saw very particularly onto the page, which is unique for a commissioner. Actually, I usually have a bit more room to interpret. So I was very much working with him back and forth to try to pull images of these creatures out of his brain and put them on the page. So with the storyboarding, it's been a lot more back and forth. Like, how do you think Lorelei would behave in this circumstance? How she should carry herself? Like, what shot would best emphasize, both her initial embarrassment trying to one up her cousin Mal, the hero who's mentioned, and her attempts to impress her father, and then later throwing all of that aside and becoming this very strong individual with quite a bit of a chip on her shoulder. So just framing her differently and working with that has been interesting.
The book we're talking about is Eludoran, and that's spelled Eludoran. The website for the information is eludoran.com. Go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and you can link on directly to Jonathan's website, get the information on the book, see what Anye has done from an illustration standpoint. Jonathan, as I'm reading through Eludoran, there are really so many different layers to the story. From an audience standpoint, who is it that you see as the target audience?
Well, when I first started writing the story, my target audience was fantasy readers and people who liked animal characters, stuff like Brian Jack's Red Wall series or Chronicles of Narnia, that sort of thing. Yeah, so I kind of thought I was pandering to that kind of audience, which is lucky because I met Miss Ewing here who seems to specialize in similar areas as me, so that was a good thing. As the book finally got finished and published, actually I'm not quite sure what the audience will be, because it's not only, I like to think that it's not only going to cater to the fantasy lovers, but also to literaries as well, because there's going to be literary elements hidden in the text for those who are keen enough to dig deep enough to look.
The book is Eludoran, and it's Eludoran, the website eludoran.com. We started off the program talking about prize-winning, record-breaking. Jonathan, let's talk about that. In terms of record-breaking, and let's start with that. This actually has established some records and quite possibly could establish more, couldn't it?
Yeah, I first considered the possibility when I finished writing my first part, Act 1 of Eludoran. That one topped at around 6,000 lines, so I thought I had a good thing going. I might as well just keep going and see how far I could go with this thing. So I wrote another act and another one. So the finished product is about 50,800 lines, thereabouts, and I believe it has broken a world record for longest poetry in tetrameter, 8-syllable tetrameter length. And that's available on Record Setter if anyone wants to go and look at it, search up the website. I also applied for the Guinness Book of World Records, but unfortunately they don't look at poetry categories any longer. The last time they looked at poetry categories was about 2005, but I'm quite sure that if they did consider the category, I would have made that record too. So it's not much of a difference either way.
Yes, it is prize-winning. It is an excellent book, and once you pick it up, it's very easy to read. You'll be fascinated with the story. I noticed in the beginning it was dedicated to your grandfather. We got a minute or so left here. Talk about the influence he had on your life, and your family had a great influence as well. They've really encouraged you since elementary school in terms of your writing.
Yeah, of course they had a focal point of my life, but mostly my writing is kind of like an individual pursuit. My family does what they can, but they're not really into the poem aspect or this kind of thing that I've written. I mean, my father, he's like a working man and he doesn't really have time for reading this kind of literary works. I've got the book in front of him and he still won't touch it because it's so thick. I think he uses it as a paperweight, but aside from that. My grandfather, he was a great man. He looked after, he was my caregiver, I suppose, when I was young, and he passed away recently. So I thought I would dedicate a tragedy to his memory because he had considerable impact in my life, and that's partly the reason why I chose the topic matter and subject matter, because Asian cultures and the miscommunication between older and younger generations that came from real life events and stuff that I've witnessed, heard, or seen when living in Singapore. So that was the inspiration for that.
The book is Eludoran, Eludoran. I talked before with Anye the possibility of an animated film, graphic novel, comic feature. Jonathan, before we go, where do you stand with that? Will we see this in an animated form like that?
Oh, I certainly hope so. Since me and Miss Ewing here have been spending close to a year now perfecting the format of the storyboard. I guess it's every author's dream to be one day part of a movie or an animated film, except in my case, I'm taking a bit further with the dream and actually getting something done with it. I'm funding my own project and everything. I'm not going to wait for Hollywood to come knocking on my door and asking if they can make a film out of my thing, because knowing Hollywood, they'll probably mess it up. So
we've got a working animatic that he's been commissioning me for. It's going to be about 1 minute and 40 seconds long. So
that is perfect. And all that information you can find by linking on directly at our website, thisweekinamerica.us, or go to Jonathan's website, eludoran.com, Eludoran.com. The book's available at Amazon, at Barnes & Noble. And information on Anye, that's Anya Rose, ROSE.net. Information on her illustrations, her art, you can find at the website as well. All of that available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. It's been fascinating having both of you on the program, especially since we're going from Singapore to New Jersey to the Midwest in the United States. It's been fun having both of you on the program. Eludoran is the name of the book. Once again, it's Eludoran. Jonathan, excellent job. And Jonathan Go, his last name is spelled Goh. Jonathan, thank you for being with us on the program. We will stay in touch, and best of luck with the project.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. You. And Anye, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're listening to This Week in America. All the information available, all the links at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.